We got a good show for you today. Here in the FTS podcast. Hey Curt, it's Lawrence. I think I'm outside. You have a Ram truck? All right, thanks. So Curt's been instrumental in so many physicians' awakening to what's possible in healthcare. And I'm excited for you guys to be able to meet him. He's on the shirt right here. This awesome t-shirt that somebody made. Physician quality improvement. Very rare and special program. I gotta lose some weight. If you guys have any tips where I don't have to exercise and I don't have to curtail my eating, let me know. That would be awesome. What? No, I can't do methamphetamine. I wouldn't do that. I'll just have to suck it up. I'll have to make the change. Right? Take care of myself. You can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, right? Oh, there he is. Hop on in.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening. We're already rolling. Thanks so much for taking time out of your evening to join us.
No problem.
Join me and us. So, you were telling me the other day that you were going to do kind of a facilitation thing for one of the hospitals nearby, and did that happen already, or?
No, that's happening, I think, on Thursday.
It's Thursday.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the really special things about kind of the training that you've offered us, that we've been able to see problems from kind of systems perspectives and not to get fixed on linear causality and single solutions. So when challenges appear in our workplace, we can use some of that wisdom and understanding and go in there and kind of assist with making those facilitate those conversations to get to some solutions.
Well, I think part of the problem, though, is that we're all problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
So when we come up with a problem, we want to solve it.
Yeah.
And we come up with our solutions and we bring it to everyone else and we tell them what the solution to their problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't usually go over very well.
Yeah.
So the approach is to go in, help them define what their problem is, and then gather up their thoughts, their ideas on how to solve that problem, help them clarify it,
Mm-hmm.
and send them down that road.
Mm-hmm.
If they can solve their problem, they'll accept it.
Now, in your experience in healthcare, have you actually seen anyone take the approach that you hope to take with this group, or how have problems typically been solved at tables that you've been at?
I think in all aspects of life, a good leader will solve problems this way. Right? You come to your group, you get them involved in the solution.
Mm-hmm.
A poor leader will want to manage the situation and dictate the solution. One of the things I like to say is that if you come to me with a solution, you own the problem.
Come to me with a solution,
You own
then
the
I
problem.
own the problem.
You come to me with a problem and we can work on it together.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the main. When I first came into the program, that you'd started with your small team at Fraser Health, Physician Quality Improvement Program. I'd come with a problem and a solution. It was I wanted to try to.
I think you came with a solution looking for a problem.
Very, very likely. I wanted to use cell phones, give patients cell phones, and allow them to text to be able to connect with kind of like an orientation person at the hospital to kind of reduce the anxiety of their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I thought, because that's what works for me. So I wanted to apply that everywhere. And of course, I hadn't done any environmental scan. I hadn't reached out to any sponsors, executive, medical, or otherwise, and so of course the idea flopped.
Well,
Yeah.
but more important than that is, did you check it out with the patients you were targeting?
Yeah.
Is that a solution that worked for them?
No, I never, I didn't even know how to run a focus group. I didn't know how to design surveys. I didn't know how to really do good.
But again, that comes back to, as physicians,
Mhm.
we're problem solvers.
Yeah.
Here's a problem. Here's my solution. As
Mhm.
physicians, especially, I'm a specialist physician. I'm a consultant, so I don't. Um, in my professional work, people come to me for solutions, and I provide them.
Yeah.
So the whole idea that we would go to the patient to talk about what they need, what their solutions are,
Mhm.
is somewhat foreign, and it shouldn't be.
It's very foreign, and I know that you came into medicine kind of later in your life. Prior to that, you'd done quite a few other jobs.
Yeah, I couldn't help hold a steady job.
And in your other jobs that you did was kind of like stakeholder engagement, or the end user uh, opinion taking. Was that a common thing, or in your other jobs?
Well, I did a lot of work in high tech computers and developing applications and things like that, and that's a field that suffered from some of the same problems. That we were the tech gurus. We will tell you how to solve your problem. But very much like what we're talking in medicine, what we found is that if the end user wanted a system to work, it didn't matter how bad it was, it would work. If the end user didn't want it to work, it doesn't matter how good it was, it wouldn't work. So, if we go back to Deming's system of profound knowledge, that psychology aspect, it'll override almost every other thing there.
Yeah, the people side of change when you're trying to introduce a solution that's new to the people that will be impacted by that solution, right?
Well, new is not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily difficult for people. New and imposed is difficult. New but mine, that's not so tough. So it's that buy-in. It's having people engaged in solving their problems. They buy into the solution, and if they want it to work, it'll work.
I was recently at Vancouver Island, as you know, working with the physician quality improvement team up there, and they'd said that the term system of profound knowledge, they called it a presumptuous or a really audacious label for a concept. What do you think about that?
Well, I can't say Deming was the best at coming up with with terminology.
Okay.
But the ideas are good.
Yeah. And coming up in I think it's about 10 to 15 days, we'll be down in Florida. You'll be giving a presentation probably about kind of, is it like the recipe of how to create a program where health professionals can
there is no recipe. What we're going to do is talk about the journey that we've taken, some of the things that worked for us, some of the things that didn't work, and more importantly, what we learned along the way. So any spread project, you can't rubber stamp. It doesn't work, and part of the reason is that psychology thing that we talked about. You don't get the buy-in, but also every location is different in its constraints, its resources, some of the attitudes that are there, some of the specifics of the problem, and the solutions need to be tailored to the situation by the people who are longer there. So what we can do is we can tell them what we thought was important, how we went about it, where we fell down, what we learned on the way, and they can take that and apply it. So in any spread project, the single piece of documentation that I think is the most important is the driver diagram. It tells you exactly what your aim statement was, what you were trying to accomplish, and your mental model of what's needed to attain that. And then the second piece of information that's important after that is your PDSA log. What did you try and what happened? And generally in publishing any stories about QI projects, you never see those two documents. But those are the two I think are most important. So in going through the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more in terms of this as a QI project with its aim statement, with its driver diagram, with our theories about what it's going to take, and the various things that we tried along the way. So we're into year 5 now. So we've learned a lot along the way, and not all of it is intuitive.
And I know that the original team was you and Angela, and then
the original team was me.
Just you.
Year 1, I was running solo, and that was because Fraser Health went under review. There was a leadership change, and everyone kind of put their heads down while they decided who was getting fired, who was sticking around. And that was good and bad. It was good in that nobody interfered with the program, so I got to do exactly what I thought the program needed to be, and the people working with me in Cohort 1 pretty much had free rein. It was bad in that there was no help. It was just one person running solo. And then towards the end of that year, we had Crystal came on as first employee, and then Angela came on shortly afterwards. And then we spent the second year trying to hire and train staff in order to make the program more sustainable.
I remember hearing that that Dr. Jan Cornder was one of the kind of the part of the impetus of the physician quality improvement program as well. Where did you and him have a pretty close relationship?
No, very much the opposite. I went to a meeting. I forget what it was. Jan was told to put forward the idea of a physician compact, and I took him to task for it. And I took him to task for the way they were looking at going about engaging physicians. And I trotted out the IHI white paper, and he'd seen it. And anyway, we had a discussion about it and never came to any conclusions. So when the opportunity came up to run a quality improvement physician engagement project, PQI, John called together all of the people that he could think of that might be interested, and we had our first meeting. And there's presentations by doctors of BC who were financing it, and Jen stayed fairly quiet. And at the end of that first meeting, he stood back from it, and basically I was asked to either put up or shut up. So I took on the chairing of the project with a working group. And the most important thing that Jan did is recognize that it needed to be physician-centered, physician-led. And so he kind of kicked us down the road, and he left us alone. And I think that was brilliant.
And then, unfortunately, he had his own health issues and passed. I think within the first year of PRST.
Within the first couple of years, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But Jan was really pretty much out of the whole project as soon as it was started. I spent pretty much a full year working on infrastructure and alignment, talking with, we had 2 CEOs that I went through in that first year, 2 VP medicines. So we did a lot of work up front getting things ready before we actually kicked off the cohort. So the cohort really never materialized for a year, and by that time Jan was he was having health problems.
So at this time you had already completed the improvement advisor cohort 3 in Boston by this time, right? Or
yeah, I was wave 30 of the IA program in Boston, full year program, and then I went back as graduate faculty, and I helped teach two waves, and that was very important to give me the confidence, but also the experience to be able to bring that level of teaching back.
Yeah, and that understanding of really the value of the science that you're able that program teaches. Who inspired you to go to Boston? Because who inspired you to do that?
Well, my interest in quality is a long time ago. I got into medicine late, so I got into quality more in industry. I was in IT, and it was probably about 1980. A couple of books. Crosby's Quality is Free.
Quality is Free by Crosby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, quality maybe, but the book wasn't. And another one, Art of Japanese Management, things like that. That's
Art of Japanese Management. So kind of like Toyota Production System stuff?
That's exactly what it was. And those were sort of my introduction to the whole thing. And then over the years, mostly reading, but no real formal instruction in it until IHI and the Boston courses.
So you were aware of the possibilities within kind of quality improvement in manufacturing, production, technology sector,
and practicing somewhat. So within IT, it was mostly lean types of techniques that were more in vogue. And good tool sets, good thoughts, sort of really bad models, but over the years those changed and evolved.
I'll never forget what you quoted for me about models. You said, "All models are wrong, but some are helpful."
Yeah,
is that you?
Yeah, I stole that.
Yeah,
yeah.
We all do.
But it's true. Yeah.
QI is all about stealing good ideas. Yeah.
I think that was that Box that did that. It was a statistician.
Somebody can Google it later. So you were aware of the value of the quality methodologies, lean and improvement in the IT. What inspired you to get into medicine?
Oh, that's a whole different story. I have a short attention span.
Okay.
So I started out in marine biology, did a master's in that. Started doing a lot of computer work as part of my biology.
Kind of model
No,
simulations?
multivariate statistics mostly.
Multivariate statistics.
Yeah, and some specialized statistics that was useful in taxonomy. But I was doing more and more computer stuff, and I was at USC in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And a position came open in the department, and I think 600 people applied.
For which marine?
For one position.
For one position in which in what area of the
in biology.
Biology, okay.
And of the 600 people that applied, it became very clear that anyone that was into the natural history part of things that I was trained in really had no hope.
Oh.
So it was also about the time my daughter was born. So a little dose of reality in there. So I went back and went into a master's program in computer science that had a little more hope of getting the job. And so I went into computer science at that point.
So So you had a master's in marine biology, and then now you're going to do your second master's
in computer science.
Computer science.
And I did that for quite a while. And I worked high tech stuff. I did operations research.
What research?
Operations research.
Operations research, like
for a large mining company.
Oh.
So mining engineering, geology programs. It was interesting stuff. And then I went to BC Tel, and I was working on support for the cellular network when it first came in. We were building. The company I was working for was building cellular systems, towers and switches. So I was support for that research.
Is BC Tel still around?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, TELUS.
Now it's TELUS, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a gargantuan.
But but NPR, the company that I worked for, is no longer around.
Okay.
So, but throughout all of that, it was interesting work for a while, but it got to be very much
same old
every day. Same old, yeah. Even though it was the higher end of things, and the end result is, I really didn't have a lot of effect on the individual people that I was dealing with. And as my kids got older, I started taking them out into the bush, and figured I needed to have some first aid training.
Oh.
So I went and took a look around, and I could do a weekend course. Or being the overachiever I am, I went and instead took a industrial first aid course. And got back to work, and they paid me a little bit to hand out Band-Aids and aspirin. And that was my license. My first license was good for a year, and then I had to go back and renew it. So I went back, and they gave me what was called a AA license at the time, which is what the guys working way out in the bush with in the logging camps had, that were dealing with the real emergencies. And it kind of scared me, because someone was going to expect me to know something other than Band-Aids and aspirin. So I had a couple of choices on how to do
how to advance your knowledge.
What we'd call CME now.
Oh.
And one was there was first aid competitions, which is
weird.
Like
how well do you do CPR kind of thing?
Well, no, it was more how well can you put a spike on and splint and things like that, and do your assessments and all that. That has value, but it didn't really grab me all that much. Or I could go and hire on locally with the ambulance service. So that's what I did. I was one of the last people, actually, that managed to hire on within the Vancouver post with BC Ambulance.
Like in Vancouver proper?
I was in Port Moody, but
okay.
Yeah, but the whole area is Vancouver post. And so I did that. I had way too much fun.
Just riding on ambulance, responding to calls, getting the sirens.
We were doing, just everything. everything that happens in Vancouver, he would respond to it.
Wow.
And like I said, it was just way too much fun. So I decided to go into medicine.
This is the 90s or 80s? The 80s?
80s is when I joined ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 92 was my first day at medical school.
Wow. So you came in with way more life experience at least than your classmates.
Way more life experience and way more medical experience. The ambulance experience was an outstanding help.
Wow.
As a result of that experience, throughout medical school and my internship in particular, into my residency somewhat, I got to do things that nobody else got to do at my level, just because I had some skills and basically I wasn't afraid to touch patients because I'd been doing it out on the streets, and so I could talk to patients. I could do rapid assessments. Just all of the skills that a good paramedic has translates so well into life as a medical student, intern, resident, doctor.
Did you have a beard at that time already?
I've had a beard since I was 16.
Oh my God!
I shaved once. Didn't like it.
Oh man!
It gets to be a habit though. You end up having to do it every morning. Yeah.
So were you a shit stirrer in medical school as well?
I've always been.
You've always been.
Yeah. No, one of a few things you need to, I think, do well in quality improvement. One is you have to recognize what could be. Mm-hmm. You need to recognize the gap, and you have to recognize either that you have the ability to change it, or that if you don't try, you're part of the problem. One of the two.
Yes.
And that kind of sets you up as a shit disturber, doesn't it?
It does. You have this intrinsic drive to create change, to really identify as a change agent.
Well, it's part of it is you see that gap between what is and what could be, and it's fairly common anytime a couple doctors get together, complain about the system and how bad it is.
Yeah, a lot of complaining.
Yeah, but so why aren't you doing something about it? Mm-hmm. Well,
I don't know how to do it.
Well, no. Usually
there's no team.
Usually the answer is because no one will let me. Mm. Well, yeah, but have you tried? Mm-hmm. Well, no, because I know no one will let me. Well, okay.
You've already shot yourself in the foot.
Well, if you haven't, okay, if you try and they say no, it's their fault. If you don't try, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Because you haven't given them the opportunity. If we're doing an S&M on this, but a lot of that mentality is.
Did you say S&M?
Us and
them. Okay, us and them.
But not
very different.
Yeah, well, not very different.
It's true, a little bit different. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think we all have a responsibility to at least try.
Yes.
And then life gets complicated, because if they say no, is it because they're intrinsically bad people? Well, probably not. Or because you haven't made a good enough case.
We haven't tried the right way, or we haven't tried hard enough, or we
don't understand what their priorities are that need to be addressed in order to get them to say yes. So once you start down that road, life changes a lot. Mm-hmm.
You'd said that at one point, I remember you telling me that you wished that in medical school, in the medical school curriculum, there was some more critical thinking education. What did you mean by that?
Well, not just medical school, but all school.
Okay.
So a lot of medical schools, using that as an example, is about rote learning.
Rote learn, yeah, memorization, and
You
can you spit it out?
Yeah, memorize lists of this and that, and mnemonics to help you memorize lists, and that's important for anatomy, because the names don't necessarily work in any way other than memorization. But when you're dealing with concepts, you're dealing with physiology, you're dealing with pharmacology. It's far more important to understand principles, understand mechanisms, and the same's true of dealing with people, dealing with concepts, dealing with politics,
deal with conflict.
It's being able to think critically about what the issues are, the pros, the cons, the other sides of the arguments, understanding a bad argument from a good argument. All of those things are just basic life skills, and I think they get lost in the busyness of memorizing, or the busyness of learning facts rather than what to do with facts.
And with the advent of these mobile brains and Google and all that stuff, all the online databases and apps, the value of rote memorization seems to be decreasing a little bit, eh?
Well, they can be a great aid, but it's still the critical thinking, the knowing how to learn, knowing how to think critically, that allows you to take that resource and use it.
Now, I've heard you mention one time that when there is some type of disagreements at tables within medical leadership, that consensus is a lot better than just taking a vote on things.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Okay, so if you work by majority, you can make decisions fairly quickly, but they're not necessarily well discussed, well considered decisions. And it's related to what we were talking about earlier about buy-in as well. Is if you have a vote and 51% say yes and 49% say no, you've lost 49% of the people in that meeting. They haven't bought into the solution. In fact, they opposed it. So where is that going to take you when you need to implement? On the other hand, if you work by consensus, then the only way you're going to get through this is by having a good understanding of the other person's point of view, understanding the pros and the cons of it, being able to demonstrate the pros and the cons of your point of view, being able to balance those, being able to compromise in ways that meet everyone's goals. With a vote, you don't necessarily even get to understand what those are or what those compromises could look like. And generally, when you work through consensus, going through that exercise, you end up with a solution that's much stronger and a better decision than you would have if you just plowed through with a vote that can be done based on political alliances and issues that are their side issues are unrelated that come into play, but you don't necessarily make the best decision. And at the same time, when you've made that decision by voting, if you've lost part of the support you need to make it happen, then you're running into trouble.
Even if you try to implement, you're working with half your team, right?
And the other half may be working against you. They haven't bought into it. They don't think it's going to work. And that's often a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So we've spoken about how important it is to try in the right way and figure out what the needs are of the people that you're working with when you're doing quality improvement. You know, a lot of this, I would say, falls into the realm of strategy, like strategic action and stuff. Do you have any recommendations on how someone can up their skills in strategic planning and for quality improvement projects? Are there
Oh boy,
any texts or any?
that's
Just a life experience
that's
thing.
level on level on level, right? So again, system of profound knowledge, systems thinking. So systems thinking is critical. It's one of the four lenses in profound knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at everything as a system, in all of the interrelationships, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to look at things in terms of systems evolving through time, of
Systems over time.
And people over time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at strategy is systems and time, and a lot of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look, so long-term strategy is really difficult because that crystal ball, it really isn't very clear. It's pretty fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what I think you need to do is set up for a very fuzzy direction, but also set up for a lot of flexibility, so that you can adjust as you go. So I think PQI, for example, is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to predict on year one where we'd be year 5.
Yeah.
I would never have been able to sit down and predict this is where
Really, you wouldn't have been predicted that we now have this many faculty, this many engaged and really like devoted physicians, and
No.
Wow.
No.
I thought you would have definitely known that. That's the only reason you would have invested so much of your life into creating it.
Well, but if you look at how much of that is just opportunities that presented. The general direction was there. Right? That part, I knew what that was. But as the individual opportunities arise, you have to have the ability to recognize the opportunity, and you have to have the flexibility and nimbleness to take advantage of the opportunity.
So staying aware and then being able to adapt and change direction in that slight way if you needed to.
So every one of you individually coming into the program represented a unique opportunity. I couldn't have predicted that you would be in cohort 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I couldn't have predicted that.
No.
So I couldn't have predicted the opportunity that provided. Similarly with the other faculty involved, the other people involved, the staff involved. Until we'd hired them, we didn't know that they were going to apply. And so, again, if you go back to psychology, the people side of things, most of what's driven where we are right now are the people who've gotten involved.
Yeah.
That was unpredictable.
Yeah, the people individually taking ownership of their own part of the movement of the project and running with it.
But at the same time, we set up a system that gave us the flexibility to develop those people, to suck them in, and provide them with the latitude to grow and run with it,
and to find their place in it. To see themselves as part of the vision, really.
So one of the lessons of cohort 1 was that cohort 1 was not sustainable. I couldn't do that repeatedly. And there's no big lesson there. We knew that. But succession planning is extremely important. And so right now, where most of the province is hurting for faculty, is hurting for people who can teach this stuff, we have, what, over 20 people?
Relative abundance, yeah.
Yeah, we, if anything, we have trouble making good use of everyone. And I'd much rather have that problem.
Yeah. But it did take 5 years invested to get that to that point.
That's leverage, right? So the system as it's set up that allowed this to happen is about leverage. It's about empowering the people who are coming in. It's not about turf and fences. It's about breaking down as much as that as possible, giving you the tools that you need to do the job that you see, providing you the support to do that, providing you the room to do that. For example, remember the first time that Angela and I weren't at
the cohort day.
Cohort day.
We were nervous, yeah.
Yeah, but somewhere in there, you guys needed to fly solo.
Yeah.
And we found an excuse for you to do that, and you've never looked back. But you've got to make that room.
Make that room for us to step into it and step up. Yeah.
Well, because who's after the first year, who's going to challenge me in the role that I play? I don't think anyone's going to do that. So unless I step back and leave room, nobody's going to step into my role.
So who's going to challenge you? Meaning, you've done the first year, so us as coming in, we're not going to challenge you. Is that what you mean? Or
nobody's going to try and step into a role that I'm already in.
Oh yes, yeah, because there's no one sees that as an opportunity.
Because I'm doing it.
Yes,
and
you've taken up that space.
I've taken up that space. I've defined that role. So who's going to think they can come in and do even as well in that role that I've defined?
And all of us junior faculty had that challenge, that conundrum, and we're like, if we step in it, we're going to do it completely different. Is that going to be good enough? We had those questions. We really did.
So that's where you have to leave the space, because nobody's going to step into that space if it's occupied.
I think there's a temptation for some leaders to actually stay and monitor and micromanage. How do you let go?
But I did that for the first year of faculty development. Right?
Oh, okay.
I was in every class. I was there.
That's true.
When I thought something wasn't covered well enough or needed to be expounded on, I stood up and I did it. I hope I didn't do it in any way that made anyone feel like they weren't doing a good job.
If anything, you gave us way too much room, in my opinion. Like many of us half-assed our way sometimes through part of the cohort training. So it was, it was a little bit nerve-wracking at times to say, oh wow, now I'm actually learning it maybe for the first time and teaching it. But
how is that going to happen any other way?
There's no other way. You're right. If you occupy the space, we can't step in.
That's right.
So with the design of physician quality improvement, did you borrow anything from other systems? Was there a precedence? Was there a bright spot that you tried to emulate or mimic?
Well, I took the curriculum from IHI, the IA program. But there were some things in that curriculum that I thought were important that weren't there. So particularly leadership, because the role that we want the physicians to play is as a leader in the system. And so I put a whole day of leadership training in. That's not in that IA program. The other thing that I thought was important was to have a little bit of a working understanding of Lean Six Sigma. I did that in cohort 1, 2. I'm not sure I did it in 3 or not.
I don't remember it in 3, but I remember it in 2.
Yeah, eventually we ran out of time in the curriculum to have that in there. and so it had to get dropped. But I did put it in because there's such a strong Lean Six Sigma bent in a lot of the corporate QI. So Provincial had a very strong Lean Six Sigma group a number of years ago. Fraser's corporate group is somewhat Lean Six Sigma, and Lean Six Sigma follows a corporate model quite nicely. It doesn't follow a sort of a grassroots model quite as well.
Mm-hmm. So corporate model meaning kind of top down, and grassroots meaning bottom up.
More bottom up,
and that's kind of what physician quality improvement is. Now, when you're sitting at your tables, with leadership in various levels of our health system, do you speak about PQI as being bottom up, and does that threaten some people? Or?
Well, what I usually say is that QI works best when there's a balance between top down and bottom up.
Yes.
Because the bigger initiatives, so in surgery, ARS was probably one of those. Sometimes they need to happen in a more coordinated fashion, and so the top down is some component of that needs to be there. On the other hand, from the 30,000 feet view that the C-suite gets, there's a lot of problems on the ground that just aren't visible, which doesn't mean they're not important, that they're not creating a lot of waste in money, time, patient outcomes, but they're not visible. They're only visible to the people on the ground who see them, know what should be, and recognize that gap. So you do need that balance in there. And I think human condition is that when someone dictates to you, you shall do this, the knee-jerk reaction is not a positive one. So by having the bottom-up QI, and the relationships that form as a result of that, I think you start to create some tolerance for the top-down in a way that the grassroots can then take ownership of it and make it work. So that balance is, I think, very important. If all you have is top-down, I don't think it's likely to work very well.
Absolutely. There becomes almost like a subconscious rebellion or just a passive aggressiveness of the.
That passive aggressiveness is, I think, very evident in every day. Working in these large corporate health systems. That attitude is ubiquitous.
If you had a magic wand, is there anything that you would want to do with how our health system runs?
Ooh, only one thing?
Your top two, top three?
Top three. The biggest thing that has to change is culture.
Culture.
But culture doesn't change all by itself.
It changes with leadership, doesn't it?
No. Leadership's important to it. But culture is far more than leadership. Culture can be destroyed in the boardroom, but culture is built in the hallways.
Oh.
So if you want to create the culture, leadership's important. But I don't think leadership can do it all by themselves. I think this is where PQI has a lot to offer, because we're an opportunity for leadership to partner and build those relationships and change that culture.
Yeah.
But to have a reviled leadership walk the hallways doesn't change culture.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what you're saying is that our cohort members, they learn leadership skills and they begin to step into leadership as change leaders within their local uh, area of work, right?
well, in order to get their project done for their training, they have to interact with their team, which includes administration.
Mm,
So, um, because they have to interact with them, because they get to know them on a more personal level, they start to see
the humanity
the humanity, but
challenges.
the problems that they're faced with,
Mm,
and how they're mirrored um, a little differently than the problems we deal with as clinicians, but they're related.
mm,
That starts to build those personal relationships that are critical to culture.
mm,
Without that, to have administration walk the hallways and say, "You guys need to do this, you guys need to do that,"
mm,
that that culture is destroyed.
mm.
It's that's not the change you need. You need um, you need management involved. Administration has to be involved in it, but you also need a receptive audience, and that's one of the things that we create.
So, so one of the things that PQI does to the culture is creates a receptive audience that believes in the possibility of change on at an iterative level, right?
And it builds relationships.
And builds relationships and trusting relationships. Hopefully, yeah. When you say that with a magic wand you would change culture, is that the
That's a
level?
big wand.
Yeah. And can you describe further, like what is the culture that potentially would be better for our system?
Well, it's
What is the ideal culture?
okay. So
Is it
when I talk,
underlined by values? Is it underlined by?
well, values are important to that, but
Mm,
when I put the leadership module in, I took it out of mostly the work of Maccabee.
yeah, health, transformational health leadership, right?
Yeah, that's Maccabee and Norman
Mm-hmm.
Marjolais. They it's a bit of a summary of some of Maccabee's other work, along with the Normans put in the QI components to that. It's a good book because it's an integration of those. But the stuff that I found particularly important in there was the cultural context. And the way I look at it now is Maccabee talks about the corporate culture, the top-down hierarchical culture that bureaucratic culture is what he calls it.
Mm,
That is the health authority. He talks about the craftsman culture that is the physician.
mm,
We have our guilds, we have our apprentices, we are fiercely independent. All of the things that the 13th century guild craftsmen.
yeah, we value the beauty of what we do, and we are quite stringent in our own cliques about how things ought to be done.
Yeah. So we're dealing with a medical culture that dates back to the 1300s.
Mm,
That clashes with a bureaucratic structure that came up in the Industrial Revolution, and it's just a huge culture clash that we get into. So Maccabee talks about the knowledge interactive culture, which is a flattened hierarchy. It's merit based. The relationships form and dissolve as functionally necessary, and it's to some extent that's what we do in our QI projects,
mhm,
and so everyone's involved because they're respected for the knowledge and skill they bring to the team. So very much that type of knowledge interactive culture. So that's one way that I look at it. Another way I look at it is the health authorities run under a corporate model. They're very hierarchical. They have multiple levels of management there. The top levels are looking at strategy. Underneath that, someone's looking at tactical planning. Operational people are tasked with maintaining status quo, and so trying to turn that around is like trying to turn an oil tanker, right? The whole organism of that corporation is hell-bent on maintaining status quo. Contrast that with some positions, certainly PQI, that is very much an entrepreneurial culture. We talked earlier about how you needed to be flexible and nimble, recognize opportunity, and then be nimble enough to seize that opportunity when it arrives. Well, that's very much that entrepreneurial culture. So we have another dimension of cultural conflict that we run into, and what needs to happen is these things need to achieve some degree of balance and some degree of tolerance for each other. We need that corporate structure in there just to manage the supply chain. You can't manage keeping the OR stocked by consensus. It's not an efficient way to manage something that really that corporate bureaucratic structure does very well. On the other hand, one of the last things we want to do is have that corporate bureaucratic structure manage the care of individual patients. So there's a balance that's required between these conflicting cultures, and an understanding of them and where their value is.
So you mentioned supply chain, which I know there's a lot of engineers who work in supply chain. That's just how a particular organization gets certain supplies, right? The complexity of putting,
how do you get
sourcing things?
How do you get sutures into the operating room so that when the surgeon calls for a 3-0 on a straight needle, that it's there.
It's right there, and you're not having too much extra over inventory, and you're not having too little, and it's there on time, and it's the right quality,
and it's the one that he has come to expect, and does the job that he needs it to do.
So we work in complex systems, and I'm in some of the conferences I'm going to, I'm coming across the idea of complexity science and complex adaptive systems and stuff like that. What do those terms mean to you? Because they don't really mean too much to me.
I think they mean a variety of things. I think at times they're a bit of a cop out for this is too complex for me. I give up. But you do need to make sure that your systems are robust, that they're flexible, that as conditions change, you have the ability to respond to that, and so you need to be adaptive. And there's no doubt that they're complex, that there's interactions in there that are somewhat unpredictable. So flexibility, nimbleness, critical thinking. Again,
in Surrey there's been some kind of like the integrative analytics team. I don't even know what they're called now, but they're connecting some databases from the back end of the EMRs, and they're trying to develop an interface. I think some data visualization interface. I think they acronymed it Archie or something. Have you heard about this?
No.
Yeah. I'm not really sure too much about it, but
so there's a number of data issues. One is that in healthcare we collect endless streams of data, And a lot of this data is collected and never used. So one of the things that we find in PQI, as soon as we go in and look at the data, we find out often how bad it is.
Yeah.
And because it's write-only data, you don't know where the problems are until you start to use it. So having the clinicians go in and use it to report on their clinical systems, you start to see some of the good and the bad of the data. And we really lack that feedback loop in a lot of it. There are definitely reams of data in disconnected systems, and connecting those up. If the goal is to create the ability to drive decisions based on good data, it's a great thing. But making sure that the data that you're using is valid is an important part of that. A lot of the data we see is less than it should be.
Is there a name for that process, like data validation or
garbage in, garbage out?
That's what it's called.
We had a data steward a while ago.
Oh, data stewardship.
Yeah, and part of his role was to look at that. And part of the problem is that when we find problems with the way data is collected or interpreted, or differences in operational definitions is an important one. We've got no place to take that. So when we had a data steward, we could take it to him. Now, he didn't have the ability to really do very much with it, but that would be the role that I would like to see is someone who had the resources to actually go and fix some of that.
What other parts of our system are under-resourced? We don't have funding for a data stewardship or a data kind of like the validity and the usefulness and the applicableness of the data.
Create a list of portions of the system that are underfunded would be.
It's like for the whole system.
Well, it's. I don't think the system is underfunded. I think
we have a lot of hidden waste, don't we?
We have a lot of waste. We have a lot of misallocation. So I think there really is the ability to do a lot more with what we have. Where that's difficult is that's an example from the operating room a number of years ago, where we were looking at doing abdominal aortic aneurysms, either the traditional way with a very large, complex operation,
big open incision.
A lot of morbidity for the patient, or doing it with a stent. And initially, the reaction was those stents are expensive. They were costing $10,000 or $20,000 each, and the open procedure cost half a day of OR time. So it was
expensive. Yeah.
It was expensive, but the half day of OR time it's in the budget. If you don't use it for the aneurysm, you use it for something else, it's still in the budget. The $20,000 was not in the budget. Now, the cost to the health system initially was about a wash, or a little better for the stent maybe, but that was for the system as a whole. Where in the operating room, it created a lot more expense in that budget. So those budget compartments, it's very difficult to create a solution when you are when you're optimizing locally, and you don't get to optimize globally.
You can't optimize across the silos of budgets almost.
Right. Right. So for example, the cost of a lot of the cost of the open procedure was in the ICU. That's somebody else's budget. The cost of the stent was to the operating room. So it made it very difficult to change that.
So one of the places where I'm in primary care as a family doctor, and I see a lot of my colleagues, we always complain about how there's not enough allocated to preventive care going upstream. And last year at the IHI forum, I remember many speakers talking about the social determinants of health, which are potentially even more upstream from primary care. What's your take on that type of allocation?
I think that's absolutely correct. It's the you need to stop the problem, not fix the symptom. And I think everyone agrees on that. The problem with that is if it takes 20 years for the benefit to arrive by going upstream, you still have to deal with the current downstream symptoms
for 20 years.
So you double your cost or whatever while you're going upstream and staying downstream. And that takes an awful lot of political courage and money.
Political courage, yeah. And is that type of thing being discussed at the bigger provincial tables that you've been privy to?
Well, we're still so siloed in acute care, or even healthcare, which is generally rescue. And it's social services that is more the upstream.
Yeah.
So nobody can. It's far more difficult to deny people emergency medical treatment. Not that they don't in various ways, but it's more difficult to do
passively, aggressively,
yeah, than it is to cut back on some of the social services where the problems may take a couple of years to show up.
So it's that temporal dissociation between cause and effect, potentially, that mismatch between what's needed in our communities and kind of the attention span or the attention focus or attention perspective of our leadership that's mismatched.
Well, if you think about the upstream problems as being measured in generations, then it's going to take you 20, 40 years to see the benefit of the upstream solutions. But during that whole time, you still have the current problems. So, take smoking. Right? Smoking has decreased a lot since when I was young. But we're still dealing with smoking-related diseases. So it's taken a generation or two to see that significantly decline. So for us to look after some of the upstream determinants, so education, we're having another crisis right now in education. That takes years in order to see the benefit of putting more resource, more thought, more quality into the education system. But the cost is incurred now.
Do you think people are talking about this reality that we do need to somehow take a hit now and double up our resources in order to make a significant gain in the future? I don't really hear many people talking like that.
I think there's a basic understanding of it, but I don't think there's much of an effort that we turn it into a reality. Politics works on 4 or 5 year cycles, election cycles.
It's unfortunate. Do you think that there's any leeway for us to change that?
Well, I don't know. I hope so.
PQI is not gonna go into that area.
Well, no, we could, but you know the difference between an optimist and a pessimist.
Intelligence? I don't know.
An optimist thinks this is the best of all possible worlds.
Mm-hmm.
A pessimist knows it is.
Oh.
So it's a matter of perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at that long-term politics, is it possible to change that? It's possible. Is it likely? If you look at the short term right now, it doesn't seem all that likely. But things can change in 2, 3, 4 years. So, if you admit defeat on any of those, you are defeated. If you work towards them, I guess you'll never be out of a job.
Do you have any idea where we are right now? Because I don't.
Yeah, I think.
I have a GPS though.
Okay.
I'll try to set a course.
I think we're going the wrong direction now.
Set a course for your own. There we go. Let's make sure it talks. It's trying to get us to walk home. 15 minutes. I have sparkling strawberry. I stole these from meetings that I went to.
Oh yeah.
0 calories, and I have ginger ale. What would you like?
I'll take ginger ale, please. Thank you. So is that more or less what you're looking for?
Yes, very much so. Have you ever been interviewed in a car with a guy wearing a t-shirt with your face on it?
No.
Well, now you can say you have. I was in, Dan Horvat took me to the NUCA system of health at South Central in August.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, that was a fun fun thing, and there's a guy out there, Steve Tierney. Have you heard of this guy?
Yep.
He's super excited about the prospect of all the wearable technology people have and leveraging that within some type of predictive analytics or artificial intelligence application, and being able to kind of use that as a passive triage system for the community that they work with.
Right.
So that they kind of know who is already doing the, like potentially if it's a pedometry or it's a heart rate monitor or oximetry or whatever, they can kind of see who's sick and who's not, and kind of like use that to prioritize the allocation of resources. I thought that was pretty interesting.
So I've got a friend who he's a anesthesiologist. He was working with some orthopods. This is in northern Alberta, and their idea was for say hip and knee replacements. We know that pre-hab is important.
Pre-hab, yeah.
Well,
getting people fit before they go to surgery, right?
And that the physio afterwards is important. So their idea was to use some of the wearable technology. They had one that they were working with that would actually measure the pre and post, and then use that not bodily effect, but also to predict who's going to run into trouble and to intervene earlier.
Mm,
But
that's awesome.
I thought it was a great idea.
Mm,
The problem with what you're talking about is how intrusive is that into people's lives, and do people want that? So are we again
solutioning people
well,
without a problem.
are we solving our feeling of their problem, or are we solving their problem?
Yeah, that is that is yeah, that's the biggest challenge in problem solving within our system. We have so many people who are really bright, really well-meaning, and only see things through their own limited perspective and aren't willing to connect with a team perspective.
So I have an app on my phone that allows me to check and see where my wife is, and where various members of my family are.
Oh.
And I think it's really great.
Is it okay for you to share which app so we can all potentially check in on it?
Well, you have to allow other people before you can.
Okay.
So you create a group of people that can each see each other.
Okay.
But I think it's very useful.
Mm-hmm.
I've got most of my family, especially when I'm traveling down south. They'll watch and see where we're at, what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them have turned theirs off because they find it creepy.
Yeah.
Someone else can track them like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very invasive.
Mm-hmm.
And
true.
You need to be aware that in the trade-offs that people make, they get to make them.
Yeah.
And making them wear something that allows you to shame them for not
exercising.
Yeah, might not be something that they want.
So again, the culture and the genuine, authentic engagement is really important in something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and individual ability to choose, to opt in, to opt out without coercion, without repercussions, and better yet, give them control over the entire application, so that they can turn it on, they can turn it off, they can see the results, but they can also choose to keep those results private to themselves alone.
Curt, you're not always seen as someone who's like into, like, if we were to do the SDI, you're not someone who's always seen as a people person, altruistic.
No, I'm red green.
Yeah. Which is performance and analysis and process. But yeah, you always speak up for the person. I think you've lived so many lives that you really appreciate the importance of autonomy and agency in every single person's life, and I think I really appreciate that. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
Are there any leaders that you really admire that have in healthcare or otherwise?
That's a tough one, because I tend to see the world in a very flat structure. I see a lot of people who think they have authority, but they only have authority because people defer to them. So a lot of times when we talk about leaders, right here, yeah. A lot of the time we talk about leaders, we're talking about these structural positions, and the ones that I'm more impressed with, I think, are the ones that that maintain control of their own lives, that live their own lives, that can manage to navigate the ruts. So more
resilient
individual.
And being individual on the side, not needing to put themselves in any type of structural position, and wield power over people, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
No names come to mind. Anybody else would know.
Well, people who I've got particular respect for.
Yeah.
Well, I think Don Berwick would be.
Mm.
I think obviously one.
Mm.
Locally there's a number of people that I won't name.
Okay.
The
Don't want anybody to feel excluded, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, there's people who have done great work.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who I quite disagree with that have done great work, and I think one of the things that's important is that we recognize the difference between disagreement and conflict. I hope I can disagree with someone without being personal.
Yes.
Or without there being conflict involved.
Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of teams. So we have opposing ideas that have some synergism in them sometimes. Yeah.
And the last thing you should do in creating a team is fill it full of people who agree with you.
Yeah.
I do a good enough job of that all by myself. What do I need? Why do I need help?
I've benefited so much from being part of the PQI program and just being around you and observing and absorbing some of the life lessons that you teach us, and I really appreciate that. It's been an awesome part of my career thus far, and
it's been fun. You're going left here.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what else we can all do together.
It's be interesting to see what the reaction is to this presentation at Orlando.
So
it's something that's very different, I think.
I know that Shoban Thakur over in Scotland in the emergency room is doing a kind of a fellowship in quality over there. What other systems are doing this type of physician quality improvement stuff that you know of? Other systems?
Well, NHS is doing a variety of things that are related. So Amar.
He is a physician one too.
Yeah, for he's East London. They're doing some really neat stuff there. London College is doing some training stuff. Her name is Julie. Anyways, she's doing some interesting stuff there. There's a lot of stuff going on that is not always easy to find out about.
I know. Again, we got huge silos. It's really hard.
It's like PQI, right? Very few people know about it. Lately, IHI has been picking up on it because we brought Don in, we brought Pat Rutherford in, and I've been talking to them about it as well. But how would you ever find out about us otherwise?
How's Pat doing, by the way? She hurt her hip, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard recently, but I was seeing some stuff on Facebook for a while, but seems to be okay. Anyway.
Hey, thank you so much for your time, Curt. And
okay, good.
I'll see you soon, maybe at the airport or something.
Okay.
Which day are you flying down?
Probably. I'm flying out on the Friday.
That's the
6th.
Yeah, I'll be down there on the 5th.
5th.
Yep. Thursday, yeah. Taking the family this time.
Oh yeah. Okay,
first time.
Good.
We're gonna do some Disney.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep.
Bye. That was awesome. Curt is the man. He's a quiet, humble leader. Quiet sometimes. He can be loud when he wants to be. And we need people who have the balls and the know-how and that that the audacity to believe that you can make a change and you can shift cultures by creating safety and stimulating thought and running audacious programs and being able to step back and allow other people to step into their leadership. I think that's been an amazing learning from the Physician Quality Improvement Program.